Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Amy Thompson.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bloomberg Tech. I'm thrilled to be here with you at this special breakfast briefing about the road to AI readiness. Artificial intelligence is reshaping industries. Leaders are navigating the opportunity and risk, striving to turn AI ambition into measurable business impact. Adoption is accelerating and the lessons are clear. AI success depends on getting the fundamentals right. This morning, we'll explore what it truly means to be AI ready, from infrastructure and expertise to deployment, security, and resilience. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge Kyndryl for supporting this morning's session. And to open our panel, please join me in welcoming Oana Beatty, Vice President of Data and AI and UKI Consult Partner at Kyndryl.
Good morning, everyone. It is great to be here with Bloomberg and so many peers exploring the next wave in AI. Across industries, we are seeing organizations race to harness AI's true potential. Yet, many are now realizing that to productionalize AI solutions that drive enterprise outcomes and impact, it requires more than just great models, or even, let's call them, maybe ambitious pilot. It needs the right backbone. It requires a well-governed, managed, and secure infrastructure that's able to support scale. And that's where agentic AI comes in. At Kyndryl, we're seeing agentic AI as expanding the very meaning of IT infrastructure, moving beyond servers and data pilots to now include AI agents, but fundamentally treating them as new, mission-critical digital colleagues. And that's where the beauty of transformation can begin to happen. These AI agents need to be treated in the same way and governed in the same way as any other enterprise asset that an organization has. There is actually no difference in behavior. At this point, it's where organizations can move from being AI-enabled to being AI native. AI native organizations, they don't just use AI. They actually design, or let's say redesign, their operations with AI agents at the heart of intelligent decisioning, at the heart of customer and colleague experience. And what does that mean? This leads to a new kind of collaboration, a new kind of working where people and AI agents can work together, they augment each other and support each other in driving great results, great business outcome. But more importantly, they work securely and responsibly within your framework, risk and regulatory frameworks. So, what does it mean to be AI native? Well, at Kyndryl, we enable organizations move beyond being AI enabled, set up the right foundations, the ones that have the right infrastructure, able to scale, infusing that infrastructure with well-governed and highly trusted data, and embedding, more importantly, security and resilience by design at the heart of agentic AI operations. And by doing so, we can push ahead and we can move at speed, and we can be certain that every decision and every action that we do, it's taking us towards our North Star, but not introducing new risk, not introducing new technical debt or future technical debt. You'll shortly hear from Patrick Gormley, who is our global lead of data and AI. And Patrick will share the insights from the forefront of agentic AI adoption frontier, where leading organizations are actually bridging the gap of readiness, and they are able to leverage true potential from agentic AI. By doing so, they kind of set a blueprint of how us, another organization, can follow safely. This is an agentic frontier, right? Agentic AI is new, it's emerging. It is taking hold into the world, and it is our combined responsibility to make sure that organizations do it in the right way. Like you, I very much look forward to the discussion ahead and hearing what our fantastic panel has to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Please welcome to the stage Patrick Gormley, Global Data Science and AI Lead, Kyndryl Consult, David Holm, Chief AI Officer, WPP, and Paul O'Sullivan, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, Salesforce UK and Ireland, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Amy Thompson.
Thanks very much for joining me. So our panel is going to look at what it really takes to compete as far as AI readiness. So at this point in 2025, I think it's fair to say that most big companies have moved well beyond whether or not to deploy AI. And the question now is really how ready your organization is. We have a great cross-section of industry here. And I want to use the session to unpack what AI readiness really means in practice and where the biggest gaps, in your opinion, still lie. So to each of you, when you think about AI readiness inside your organization, inside your client's organization, what does it mean? Is it mostly a technical challenge? Is it mostly a cultural challenge?
I think the first thing to say is getting ready this year has been extremely difficult. And that's because of the almost insane pace of technology innovation this year. So just give you a few examples, really. So one client we were working with, quite pioneering in only January this year, which seems like history now. The maximum number of agents you could orchestrate, so you send one to go and get data from like a mainframe, one from an application, etc., was 6, and that was only January this year. Then we saw a whole explosion. We saw things like deep-seek training models, if you remember, had that mainstream media implosion. That was only January this year. Then we saw things like Manus AI, and we saw better engineering of agent orchestration. And then we saw these new protocols. So a thing called Model Context Protocol from Anthropic, agent to agent from Google's. And this allowed these agents now to use tools to speak to each other. And then we've seen an explosion in the parameters of the large language models increase significantly. So we went from being able to orchestrate 6 in January to early summer, it being infinite, which is a massive change. And it's not abating the change. If you just look at those of you who use Anthropic's Claude, for example, if you're a user of that, the new model that came out only in the last 2 weeks, probably a little bit less actually, was called Sonnet 4.5. One of its parameters, its published parameters, was that this model could autonomously code for up to 30 hours. And when you compare it to its previous model, which was Opus 4.0, Opus 4.0, its stated parameters were it could autonomously code for 7 hours. Now, the key thing about that was Opus 4 only came out in August. So in 8 weeks, you've gone from 7 to 30 hours. And it's not hyperbole now to talk about best-in-class technology being obsolete now. If it's best in class today, it can be obsolete in 12 weeks, and that's a phenomenon nobody's ever dealt with before. So, and it's not slowing down.
So what I'm hearing from you is pace of change is really one of the big ones. So, Paul, are you saying the same thing at Salesforce?
Yeah, and Patrick's absolutely right. I think there is a significant pace of change. However, I also think when we look at enterprises as a whole, there are other kind of barriers. You know, if we think about the people impact, the change management, we think about strategic alignment, we think about kind of how your processes within your organization will change as well. It's really clear that every C-level that we talk to in the C-suite, they all know that AI is going to play a crucial role in their strategy moving forward. What they're trying to now figure out is, where am I going to get value from it? Because I think if we go back, and Patrick, you were talking about the pace of change, but if we go back to November 2022, when ChatGPT launched, it was this eye-opening moment where everybody in the world, when we saw generative AI, kind of went, wow. And what we saw happen was lots of organizations immediately said, right, I need to use this technology, I need to put it to work. And there was this proliferation of proof of concepts and pilots that were spun up. And in reality, I think now fast forward to where we are today with the agentic revolution and what's coming now with agentic AI and the ability to have AI agents autonomously take action, I think there is a bit of nervousness that says, I did all those proof of concepts and pilots, how do I actually get real business value? And what we're now seeing is, we've got some great customers like Heathrow, Capita, FedEx, Accenture, who are all now using Salesforce technology to unlock that value, because they've started to realize the LLMs are phenomenal, but the LLMs alone are not enough. It needs to be connected to a bigger ecosystem. You need to be able to put trust, security, governance, controls around these agents and this AI. You need to be able to also have contextual embedding, so things like retrieval augmentation generation, where you can take data objects, put it into prompts, so that actually the LLMs understand what is my business, what am I trying to achieve, and I think that's quite a complex landscape to try and do, and this is where I think customers are now starting to realize, actually, it's not just the LLMs I need to be part of something much bigger than this.
Okay. So we've got rapid pace of change. We've got complex rollouts that might not necessarily give you a return on your investment if you don't do it right. For WPP, it's maybe a slightly different lens. How are you thinking about that when looking at your clients?
Well, I've been building AI solutions for almost 2 decades, and it's natural to get very excited about emerging technologies, and rightly so for generative AI, because these things are completely transformational. But what tends to happen is that we think they're a panacea and that they can solve all of our problems across our supply chain. So AI and software, there's not much difference between them. Really, the only difference between software and AI is that AI is opaque basic in terms of how it makes its decisions. If you can make them explainable, then it takes away that problem. But projects don't fail for AI reasons. They fail for the same reasons why software fails, because they don't have the right investment, they're not maintained, all that kind of stuff. So in WP, we have, there are three things that we think are important. One is data. If you have data that contains insights that are more useful than your competition, then it's data that makes AI smart. The second is AI talent. And my company was acquired 4 years ago. We had 150 deep AI researchers, now 300. They're trying to figure out how do we apply AI across our supply chain to differentiate the marketing stack. And then leadership, it's you, it's the people listening. If you understand about the transformational technologies, if you place the right bets, then you're going to have an advantage. We see a lot of organizations ultimately trying to apply these technologies to solving the wrong problems. We're very fortunate in WPP that our leadership are all in on AI, investing now £300 million pounds a year to develop what we call WPP Open, which is a platform, end-to-end marketing platform that, yes, is differentiated in terms of its supply chain, but also deals with the governance and the security and safety, all of the things that make software successful.
Okay. So there's a few different topics that are coming up, but it sounds like the people element might be a big X factor here. There's a lot of resources happening. The change is complex. The change is fast. How do you make sure your workforce is actually ready to take this on?
I think and Daniel's absolutely right, talent, and whilst there's a lot of focus on AI and engineering talent at the moment, as Paul's mentioned as well, it's really still about change, organisational change and development. And so, yeah, you do need, there's a big shortage of AI engineers to build this stuff, but don't forget about the other things that will get adoption. That's going to be design. So a big need for people who can build the next generation of experience. Change as well. This is significant change. If you look at some of our most ambitious clients, they are talking about, they do 45 million transactions, service transactions a year. In 5 years' time, they expect 90% of those transactions to be done by agents, and they have a plan and a strategy to do that. But they actually have to now create a new organisation of 20,000 people to run this technology, and it's running technology very differently because this is constantly changing technology. So even some agent stuff we've built in June, we're swapping out now because it can use a better model. It doesn't necessarily need to be on a GPU anymore. It can even be deployed at the edge. So we've seen a whole range. It's just constant change. And of course, that constant change in technology exposes security risks, service risks. And so there's a new sort of set of skills that's got to be built to actually run this stuff when you start to run it at scale. And you're starting to run it at scale, you guys in your applications and services. And it's a very different than it used to be a few years ago in running enterprise technology. So it really, a lot of organisations do spend a lot of time thinking about future talent now and the retraining and reskilling. I think IBM's report last year, IBM did a report, said there's probably a billion gap of skills in the global market. Yeah. So people talk about not having jobs. That's not what a lot of C-suites are talking about. A lot of C-suites are talking about we've just not got enough of the right sort of people. How do we reskill? How do we retrain?
Well, it sounds like even if you've got the skills, they're out of date really quickly. So how do you make sure your workforce is like continually leveling up?
Yeah, and I think to build on Patrick's point, I think what is absolutely crucial is this understanding of what roles are going to be there in the future. Because I think there will be an augmentation, where humans and agents work together side by side. I think for us at Salesforce, one of the key things for us is some of the foundational things that need to be learnt initially, like, security. Don't feed an LLM any sensitive information, that's in the public domain. Very simple kind of things there. But what we've developed now over the last 12 months is a series of learning modules that are available on Trailhead, which is our free learning platform, with the opportunity to kind of upskill people on, some of the foundational elements, because I think everything from writing really crisp prompts that get you the response first time. I mean, I've asked many customers, how many times have you used the public LLM, put a prompt in, and then went, it's not quite the answer I was looking for, and then you suddenly you reword your prompt, you recraft it. You know, those are skills, soft skills, that I think we're going to learn how we interact with this technology over time. And then I think as it evolves, there is a lot more that I think as the changes come, we need to figure out, you know, what are the roles, what are the jobs to be done. The Industrial Revolution didn't eradicate jobs. It just gave people a different focus or a different role. And I think we're seeing ourselves in this agentic AI era of a great opportunity. The IDC reported that, similar to IBM, they said there's probably going to be 500,000 new jobs created in the Salesforce ecosystem alone from agentic AI. When we think about that, this is not a replacement of those skilled individuals. This is an augmentation. But there is still a nervousness in enterprises that I see today that people are going, it's going to take my job. So we have to educate and actually talk and look at those use cases that are going to add value to the individuals within the organization.
Now, I know the advertising industry in particular might be a bit sensitive about AI coming in. How do you sort of build the culture around that from your group?
Well, first of all, I think the marketing industry is expected to be at the forefront of using these technologies and then helping our clients understand how to utilize them. So actually, we've been very fortunate that our employees have embraced these technologies completely through our platform. Out of the 100,000 plus employees that we have 70,000 people using these technologies internally. We have a dual strategy. One is a self-serve model. So we want to put these tools in the hands of our employees to build agents, to utilize these technologies, to understand how to make their work more efficient, more effective. And obviously you have to do that in a safe way. You don't want people building software or agents that can go rogue and do silly things. So making sure that they put the right guardrails of protection, safety, security around the self-serve model has been a really interesting challenge. But now there are, I think, 50,000 agents operating across our business. And then we have another strategy, which is to identify the needs across our back office and our front office for agents, for AI. And then we have a team of people making sure that those models are trained, they're appropriate for solving that problem. And then what we can do is we can then make those models available to everybody. So now, for example, we can train a model on the data, the intelligence of our creatives or people are experts in understanding segmentation. And we can now make that model available to everybody, and it can then supercharge their job. So we've seen a mass adoption of AI, and that'll just continue.
Now, I'm interested particularly in your group internally, because you've become part of a much bigger company, and your group has become much bigger. And it's become a key part of that group's overall AI strategy. How are you dealing with that internally? How do you make sure that you're using those resources and that you're scaling correctly, and that your innovations are getting across the organization and not getting lost?
Yeah, so Satalia actually, which was acquired by WPP, didn't actually have a marketing background before the acquisition. Well, what we understood is as how to identify frictions across supply chains, opportunities to apply algorithms to innovate organizations. And so there's no secret magic bullet. You identify the frictions, and then you start knocking them off one by one, and then making sure that you're building your data infrastructure, AI infrastructure over time. So you're driving value, solving problems, placing the right bets, making, again, sure you're using the right algorithms. And generative AI is just one flavor of algorithms. There are lots of other algorithms out there, from machine learning to optimization. And it's really about understanding what the right technologies are for solving the right problem.
Okay. And I think that leads me to the next set of questions that I wanted to get into, which is governance and risk, and who actually should own the AI risk in an organization. Patrick, how do you advise clients to think through this?
So I think risk comes in many forms. Obviously, there's technology risk, but there's also many other risks, and usually caused by humans more than the technology in most cases. We've seen it play out in business risk. I mean, there was a company last week that had to pay a significant fine because it clearly looked at generative AI to create a client deliverable, which was inaccurate. That wasn't a technology. That's just a lack of process. That's just, 5 years ago, that wouldn't have not been looking at the intern's outputs before you sent it to a client. It's not different. So you've got risks of service. We're seeing risks of, obviously, security. Every agent becomes a vulnerability and needs to be managed. And then we're seeing risks of competitive risks. So there's a high degree of FOMO out there at the moment, and that's driving a lot. People are getting really fearful of the risk of their competitors outpacing them in this field as you see these continual innovations. So it's lots of risk. People are starting to work out how to manage this. For example, to manage agents that are compliant, we're now seeing technologies where you can take policy documents and you can convert them into code. And that becomes the guardrails for which agents will comply with. So particularly in places like where governments, financial services, etc., have a requirement to be compliant, they're starting to see some of the technologies a way of improving their compliance even better than the humans are not particularly compliant, by the way. Otherwise, we wouldn't drink alcohol and we wouldn't eat sugar and things like that. We're not compliant. We don't do the right things or even things we're told to do. So, but we're starting to see a next level of people getting compliance and things like that at the moment.
Is there a danger in having the AI regulate itself? At what point do you have to have a human in the loop here?
Yeah, it's more humans in control than in the loop, to be frank. Yeah, nobody wants total autonomy. Even if you look at the biggest adoption of AI at the moment, which is probably in software coding, nobody wants an agent that's going to go away for 20 minutes autonomously and come back with 1,000 lines of code. They want that continual check-in that you would have if you had a junior developer working with you to say, what do you think of this? And nobody needs that. So it's not necessarily about humans in the loop. The reality, it's got to be humans in control, just like it is now, just a hierarchy of different services and people and structures.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with that, it's about observability. It's about observability across where your agents execute, what tasks, and making sure that there's clear accountability. Because I think, to Patrick's point, you know, vibe coding being a terminology now that's kind of emerged quite rapidly, you don't want 1,000 lines of code for a human to review, but you do want the observability, and you want to understand if there was any proprietary software used in that kind of process, whether they sourced the original information. And Daniel, you mentioned explainability. I think these are absolutely key terms when we think about designing AI architecture that we have to put in the forefront of it. And it's probably going to get a little bit more complicated when we get into the world of agent to agent, kind of the MCP protocols and how do agents offhand or offset to another agent, because then it's what do they do with that information. So, you know, if there is any kind of, again, how do you minimize the risk associated with it, control the security, control the controllables, don't put any personalized identifiable information in an agent to agent kind of handoff. So I think what is absolutely crucial, but remained true for the last 20 years of any architectural kind of design principles, you know, how do we apply security by design? How do we do the exact same thing when we deploy our agents in the field?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you've used the word junior a lot, and I think that right now, I think of a large language model as a little bit like a graduate. 10 years ago, it was like a toddler. It regurgitated some words. Most of it didn't make sense. We're seeing that graduate now move to like a master's level. Maybe, you know, next year we'll have a PhD level, in a few years a postdoc, and by the end of this decade, it's predicted that we'll have a professor in our pocket. But you should ask yourself right now, would I deploy a graduate to go and solve that problem? And if the answer is no, then you probably should be careful about deploying AI. When I deploy AI in production, I ask myself three things. The first thing is the intent appropriate? Is this the right thing to do? And really, this is an ethics question. And there are already standards and structures and processes set up to scrutinize intent. AI doesn't have intent, human beings have intent, and that's what needs to get scrutinized. The second one is explainability, and if you can make your algorithms explainable, then that can help a lot with regulation, but it also can help a lot in extracting insights that allow you to make better decisions. So the power of agents is a concept called multi-agent reasoning. Agents have been around for a long time, so if I've got an agent over here that knows that Socrates is a man, and an agent over here that knows that all men are mortal, by getting them to talk to each other, I can infer that Socrates is mortal. I can infer new knowledge that's really useful for my business. Now, if I only sort of knew that Socrates is a man and was semi-confident that all men are mortal, how do I deal with that influence and inference? And the challenge is, how do you make sure you're not propagating incorrect information across your organization? And that's where explainability is critical. And the final question you need to ask yourself, which is a bit strange, is not what happens if my AI goes wrong. As an engineer, we think about, failure points, and we try to mitigate those risks when we're deploying software. But you now need to ask yourself, what happens if my AI goes very right? For the first time ever, you can build technology that can massively overachieve the goal that you've given it, and that actually can cause harm elsewhere in the supply chain. So you need now to make sure that you're looking holistically about the application of AI, not just to one part of your business, but the whole.
Okay, we're running low on time, so maybe a lightning round. If you had to advise a client to invest in one thing tomorrow to be the most AI ready for the next year, we'll say, anything further out than that feels unrealistic given the pace of change. What would it be? Paul?
I think explore your service domain. When we think about kind of consumer needs and consumer wants, there is an opportunity to absolutely delight your customers. And I think we've all just talked about some of the challenges and some of the things to be aware of with AI, but please do not walk away from here understanding the value this can drive for your business. If we think about NPS scores, CSAT improvement, and just delighting your customer with an incredible service, it's really easy to do now with the agentic capabilities, having an always on capability. No longer do I need to pick up the phone and sit in a queue somewhere waiting for a human agent to become available. I can get straight through to an agent in an agentic capacity who can take action and fulfill tasks on my behalf. So I would say, look at the service domain, look at your consumers, look at one thing that would delight them and start there.
Okay, Daniel.
Very quickly, I think come to these events to educate leadership in understanding to make sure to place the right bets, to not just go after quick wins and low-hanging fruit. Most likely, they're not going to differentiate your business. Focus on applying AI to solving problems that are going to disrupt your business from your competitors.
Patrick?
I would say be maniacal about the skills of the organisation. Act like a 4-star general does in the organisation that focuses on skills and training because they do mission-critical stuff. A general executive thinks it's a whole home HR issue. Executives need to focus on the skills and talent in their organisation to be future ready.
Thank you very much. 6 seconds to spare. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Nice job.
Please welcome to the stage Tim Eridge, Vice President and Managing Partner EMEAL for Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks, and Mary Haig, Director of Digital Delivery, Global Chief Information Officer for BAE Systems plc, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jordan Robinson.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And Mary, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. This is really been looking forward to this conversation. So we're going to be talking about cybersecurity. And on stage we have, some folks who are responsible for protecting, highly critical networks in the UK and beyond. Obviously, Mary is Deputy CIO for BAE Systems, and Tim is VP of EMEA for Palo Alto Networks, Unit 42. That is the company's incident response and threat intelligence and consulting service. So, a couple of things we're going to cover today. We're going to cover social engineering, which is a vulnerability that every organization has. The cybersecurity industry has never been bigger. It's a $200 billion plus a year business now. And we've also never seen more destructive and disruptive attacks. We're going to talk about social engineering and how organizations can protect themselves. And then, of course, with the theme of today's talk and the conference, we're going to talk about generative AI and how hackers are using generative AI and how defenders can use generative AI to get ahead of the hackers. So, Mary, I wanted to start with you. We had a conversation earlier about social engineering and the fact that, here in the UK, we've seen M&S, Co-op, we've seen Jaguar Land Rover. The list goes on and on of organizations that have been hacked very, very badly. And the disruptions are very, very great and very, very expensive. And at the core of these are essentially kids, young people, using the phone to hack these organizations and bypass all of their defenses and cause, an extraordinary amount of damage. We had an interesting conversation about how BAE protects its systems from these kinds of attacks, and it's really hard. And I was hoping you could kind of walk us through kind of some of the best practices for protecting your network against essentially phone calls that manipulate call centers.
Yeah, I think there's a few different aspects to it. So one of the first is that, like many companies, we outsource our help desk, but we maintain a really close relationship with our suppliers on those kind of things, and we're working with them to, flow down a load of requirements to them, so we don't mess around with the kind of requirements we flow down to them in terms of clearances of the staff, nationalities of the staff, because we're a defence company, so that matters in terms of the information that they can see. And then there's also the helping to train their staff. So we have a team who does security education awareness, and they're very much looking at it from that human angle of what are the human vulnerabilities and how do we work with that, not in a kind of telling off and blame way, but in an explaining the different ways that attackers can come at you and how to manage that and how to think about that and how just to take a moment, just pause if it doesn't feel right, those kind of things. And then there's kind of the process pieces to it. So if someone rings up and asks for something like a password reset, there's a whole load of process that the help desk has to go through with the member of staff or person that's pretending to be them, around asking for lots of different information, which, it can't just be that, because depending on how much you put out on social media, sometimes that kind of information can be out there and attackers have harvested it. So you have many different questions to make it harder for them to harvest it all. There's also, rather like your bank, when they ask you for a password and you just put in a couple of characters, they do that verbally. And if they don't have any of that set up, then it flicks to a trusted person. So you have to get your manager to ring up, and your manager will be on the network, and therefore you can verify they're trusted. So in other words, if one thing fails, there's another thing, there's another thing, there's another thing. So it's kind of multi-layered to try and stop it.
And that's the detail that I love in this. And part of my job is we will report on these attacks. We just did a bunch of reporting on Jaguar Land Rover. We've been reporting on all of it. And what you'll find at the core of so many of these attacks, Tim, I'm going to ask you about this in a second, is you'll find that there was somebody who called a call center, impersonated a real employee, answered a few security questions, and got a password changed. Logged onto that person's computer, escalated their privileges, stole an admin credential, and off they go. And then the company is, put out of business for a month, or longer. And the detail that I love is that if you fail the security checks, or even if you pass many of them, but you don't have all the required information, your manager has to call. It's like your manager has to call in and say, I can vouch for this person. Like, that's a very, very high level of validation. Like, not a lot of companies would do that. Obviously, BAE would, and kind of other highly sensitive companies would. But in your view, is that kind of like the gold standard? I've also heard video verification. Is that something that is like considered gold standard for validating that somebody's a real employee?
Like all of these things, the bar's moving all the time because the ways that you can impersonate are moving. So you could be on the company chat system, and you've got to be pretty verified to get onto that. Then you can switch on your video, and voice won't work because they don't know you. But I think the key is that we're constantly looking at how we're validating it and how it needs to change according to how attackers are shifting their methodologies. And
I imagine that would actually be challenging. A video verification would be challenging if you don't know what the person looks like. Quite. Or you just have a picture, right?
Yeah, it depends how prolific they are on LinkedIn and other such social media sites, but yeah.
Right. But now, Tim, going to you, a big part of your work at Palo Alto's Unit 42 is responding to these attacks, right? Like, a company will be breached. They might have lots and lots of cyber defenses. They might have world-class cyber defense, but somebody from a call center let a hacker through. What does that look like when your team goes into some of these environments and you've got customers saying, I've spent millions, maybe tens of millions on cybersecurity, but somebody abused my call center and they got in? What does that look like for your team when you show up to a place like that?
Well, firstly, one of the biggest challenges is that it's hard to know. The advent of the use of AI for deep fakes, false face, masking of voices, and as Mary said, using it to harvest essentially a highly comprehensive dossier on probably not only one victim but many potential victims, and then we would be remiss if we thought that they only tried one, right? They're probably trying many times to get in, and it only takes that one successful socially engineering of a help desk persona to get into the organization, and then it's very quick to proliferate from there. When we go in, we potentially don't know that was the source of the breach, right? We're typically called in, unfortunately, at the end of the attack life cycle where there's an objective has been achieved, the data has been stolen, the ransomware has been deployed, some impact has been felt by the organization. So our job at that point is to painstakingly try to find all of the breadcrumbs that take you back to that initial access vector. I can tell you that over 70% of our incidents worked. It was either social engineering or it was an exploit of a software vulnerability that's exposed externally. And it's roughly 50. So it's about a third of our cases are socially engineering as the root cause.
And the important part about that is those are fixable problems. These are not kind of like futuristic, unstoppable cyber attacks that like nation state, right? Something that nobody could ever imagine or predict. Like these are things that are fixable, as Mary was saying, with enough training or at least enough control, right?
In theory. I mean, the downside, as Mary said, that the capability of the attackers is ever evolving because they are able to adopt AI and take advantage of it in ways where they don't have to worry about morals and ethics and legalities and regulation and everything. So they are in a much more accelerated race to seek advantage from AI than the people on the good side. You mentioned like kind of dual approvals, like get my manager in. We've actually worked cases of insiders that have been working jobs using perpetual like face alteration, voice alteration. So these tools are there and they're being used in the wild and they are being effective. They are actually allowing a North Korean operative to be embedded as an insider and actually work a job. You know, they're having multiple Zoom calls. They're doing the actual job.
To disguise their face.
But they're disguising their identity.
Every day.
Every day. Every interaction. There are telltale signs still, again, because we're in the early stages of this evolution of attack techniques. But and it sounds like something from a movie, but it's happening. It's happening in the UK. We did a takedown of a Korean insider of a UK business a few months ago, and we had to be quite covert in how we did that.
It's so interesting. And you had told me a story earlier as well, moving to, obviously the AI stuff, is that, one of the research projects that Palo Alto's doing, can you tell us about, it's a dueling chatbot, right? Where you've got the chatbot fueled by AI and all the information that a hacker would have about a target. So you've profiled a person, you're trying to impersonate them and hack into your organization. And a chatbot on the other side that is trained with all the best practices of a call center, like the ultimate call center engineer, like the perfectly responding call center engineer. And you have these chatbots going back and forth to try to figure out what are the weak points. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we heard the tail end of the last session, right, where they're talking. Everyone's in a race to capitalize on AI to build a chatbot to be customer services and help desk. So as we know, it's a weak point. We're obviously looking to see, well, is that still going? Is that it might create cost efficiency and efficacy and effectiveness in doing the intended job, but can it be abused? So, yeah, we've got a chatbot that is effectively the adversarial AI. It's trained on all of the recent sort of scattered spider cases where they're really successful in social engineering their way in to get granted authentication, etc. And that is really effective for one of the main advantages that AI brings, which is that persistence. If you think about it, that chatbot can be dogged in its approach and it can just keep going. And if you've supplied it with a dossier with enough pretexting and background information, we've found that it's really effective at, we've done it against a manual, we all play the role of a help desk and we'll do it, but then we've built a help desk bot, as you say. But you do all the pivots that Mary was talking about and you ask all the background questions and all. it can win. It can get through all those questions. And
what do you learn from it? Do you learn that it's doggedness? Like, is that what you train then people on? Like,
I think the persistence, because again, if it's a human help desk person like on the end, I was talking to someone last week at an event about AI, and they were saying they'd listened into one of these transcripts, and it was over an hour of like just persistent, relentless. I need to get in. I need you to give me this. And that's also where if you create that sense of urgency as well. So it's like, hey, do you know who I am? I'm the CFO, and if you can take the CFO's voice and it is more recognizable, or their persona in general, it's exerting that pressure. And actually, more often than not, because, hey, I'm a call center person, I'd rather keep my job and not upset the CFO by not helping him get to his urgent meeting that he's locked out because he's changed his phone, because all that sort of stuff. So I think more often than not, human fallibility will come in, and the human will. Right. So maybe that's a key, is that chatbots could give an advantage on the defender side in a help desk scenario if they are relentless in their denial, right? And actually you can't fire it afterwards, right, if it gets it wrong.
Right, I like that.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea, because that's what you're facing. I listened to a call at one point, one of these scattered spider calls. It was an hour and a half. When we think of these hacks, I would tend to think of them as a shorter term, kind of like a shorter experience. But if you're dealing with an hour and a half, and you can't hang up the phone, like, you're going to break at some point. And I think that's really interesting advice. And Mary, you were telling me something too. I mean, you obviously work for a defense company. Generative AI is a tricky proposition for a defense company. You can't just put it in your products and let it go. No. But you did mention there are some interesting areas that your organization is using generative AI. Can you talk about, it's even basic stuff like giant repair manuals for airplanes. Can you talk about
So the nice thing about the kind of policy space and the manual space, if I can call it that, is that it's structured data and it's trusted data, which is that's your foundation for AI, having the good data that you understand and that you trust. And those support manuals, maintenance manuals for aircraft, are very trusted, right? They've been very carefully verified over a number of years. But they're big and they're hefty, and they're not particularly nice to flick through to work out how to do something.
What are we talking? Hundreds, thousands of pages?
Oh, yeah, huge. And you can imagine the learning curve for someone new coming in having to use those. So running those through an AI engine, an LLM that allows you to ask a question, it comes back with the answer and it references where it came from. So if you're still nervous, you can go and check the manual yourself, is a really good way to speed up the work for those users, and also speed up the training for a new person coming in. So it's really good efficiency.
I like
that kind of thing.
It's closed-ended research. It's trained on a trusted data set that is known to the company. There's accountability, who wrote it, how long it's been around.
Correct, and there's still a human in the loop on it.
And another interesting use case you gave, which I found interesting, was knowledge transfer. Can you talk about using generative AI for knowledge transfer?
So again, this is about kind of training people up quickly. So we've got the workforce that are reaching the end of their retirement. In some of our product areas, they're pretty niche. They're really skilled individuals who've gathered a lot of intangible knowledge over a very long time that won't necessarily all be codified. So just looking at how do you take that out of their heads and give it to the young apprentices that are coming in. And we've got amazing apprentices training centres. So, getting some of those, reaching the end of the career personnel to talk, recording.
This is literally interviewing them.
Yep, and pulling that out and using that as training for the young people coming in.
So you interview them, you record the conversation, you apply generative AI to the audio of the interview.
Yep.
And then what is the generative AI, what is the product that is then given to the younger workers?
Well, that's what we're experimenting with. So it could be they type in a question as if they're talking to that older person, say, what do I do with this? And get an answer. Or it could be in training material that we produce.
And has that been useful? Have you found that to be?
Still at the early stages of it, but yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It's interesting. And another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is we're always looking for ways, and Palo Alto's published research on this, about ways that hackers are using generative AI. We talk about chatbots and social engineering, but also emails. Mary, can you talk about where you're seeing generative AI being used? These are large language models, so you would imagine the use cases would also involve language. Can you talk about where you're seeing hackers use this technology?
So really it's to increase their efficiency in areas where they might have struggled to do it before. So it's either doing it faster, or in the case of some phishing emails that we've seen, curating phishing emails in countries where they don't have that language as their first language. So there's a really large increase in the number of phishing emails that are appearing in Japan now. So not many people outside of Japan speak Japanese. So crafting a phishing email from scratch, pretty difficult to make that convincing. With an AI model, really easy and really scalable.
Character-based languages, we're hearing this from others as well, which character-based languages, which are really hard to learn. LLMs turn out to be really, really great at crafting very finely, very refined email messages and at scale. And Tim, you had mentioned as well that you're seeing hackers use generative AI, the initial recon of a network, right? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you mentioned dossiers before, right? We're seeing evidence that they're using AI to bring together huge data sets, and then you're obviously creating, if it's targeting phishing campaign, there's understanding of what transactions might be happening, business transactions, who might be emailing them. So there's a higher fidelity, a higher efficacy because it's more tailored, because the cost of tailoring is no longer cost prohibitive, right? So you can do en masse email phishing campaigns, and you can do them highly tailored and spearfish at scale. So you get a higher hit rate, higher success rate. We even saw one instance recently where the email was compromised, and then a phishing campaign was sent from a compromised email. So
right away.
Yes, straight away. So it's like legitimately right. Let's go and see where we can get to. The other thing that we talked about was the sort of marrying up of data sets. So it's like, hey, let me grab a whole load of leaked credentials, compromised credentials, let me marry them up with where they may be applicable. So where are there exposed authentication portals or VPNs, and etc. And also where I've got an exploit, where might there be a unpatched system. So it's marrying up these data sets at scale. It's big data essentially, but to try and have a higher efficacy of it. There was one other really cool thing which I really wanted to say, which was we ourselves do hacking. So we have a red team that goes in and is paid to hack our organizations in a safe way. They recently had a success where they talking about using, like, bypassing millions of dollars of security controls. Like, they were looking for ways to move laterally, and they actually abused Copilot in an environment to gain access to a document which contained details of API keys, which then ultimately led them to further their attack and achieve their objective.
The internal AI, they abused the internal.
So they used legitimate use, business use, internal AI, Copilot. And they were there, bear in mind, they were there with a foothold and illegitimate, but masquerading as a legitimate user. But that user didn't have privileged access to these secrets in these documents. But the Copilot did, because the Copilot's got God status because it's there to help.
I love that. I love that. We've got only a short amount of time left. I will say that another thing Mary mentioned as well was that the amount of time from the disclosure of a vulnerability to that vulnerability being exploited is now down to like hours. So a company will come out with a patch. You will be seeing attacks, these folks were saying, within 3-4 hours. So like, your time has to get faster. You've got to get faster at defense, because the hackers are getting faster at offense. With that, we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for coming and talk with us today. It's a very interesting conversation. It's helpful for me in my work as well. Hopefully it's helpful for everybody as well. Wanted to thank our sponsor, Kyndryl, and let you know that the main stage sessions are going to be starting about 15 minutes. So thank you, everybody, for your time, and thank you guys so much for being here.